You go into a job and you're not smart enough for that job, you're going to have one bloody miserable time. And you're going to make life wretched for the people around you because you won't be able to handle the position. And as you climb hierarchies of competence, the demand on fluid intelligence increases. And so, unless you want to fail, you don't put yourself in over your head. Well, what's over your head? Well, that's a tricky thing to figure out. I mean, you have to figure that out with intelligence, you have to figure it out with conscientiousness, you have to figure it out with creativity, you have to figure it out with stress tolerance, with agreeableness, because you want to go into a cooperative environment and not a competitive one if you're agreeable. And with neuroticism, you probably want to keep the stress level of your job relatively low, because those are all places that you can break down. And most people have at least one significant weakness in their intelligence personality makeup, and you got to be careful not to place yourself in a position where that's going to be a fatal flaw. But what you really want to do, as far as I can tell, if you want to maximize your chances for both success and let's say well-being, is you want to find a strata of occupation in which you would have an intelligence that would put you in the upper quartile. That's perfect. Then you're a big fish in a small pond. And you don't want to be the stupidest guy in the room. It's a bloody rough place to be. So, and you probably don't want to be the smartest guy in the room either, because what that probably means is you should be in a different room, right? You should look at a place where if you're right at the top, you've mastered it. It's time to go somewhere where you're a little lower so that you've got something to climb up for. So, and if you're not hyper conscientious, for example, you're probably not going to want a job that you have to work 70 hours a week at, because you're just not wired up that way. You'd rather have some leisure, and like, more power to you. If that's how you're wired up, there's nothing wrong with having some leisure. But if you're someone who can't stand sitting around doing nothing ever, then maybe you can go into a job that's going to require you to work 75 hours a week. And almost all jobs that are at the top of complex dominance hierarchies require very high intelligence and insane levels of conscientiousness, as well, generally speaking, as pretty damn high levels of stress tolerance. You know, because that can knock you out too, because there's going to be sharp fluctuations in your career, generally speaking, at the higher levels of a structure, and you have to make very complicated decisions, often with very short time horizons. So you have to decide if that's what you want. Thinking that creativity is such a good thing. It's a high risk, high return strategy. So if you're creative, you just try this. There's creative people in this room, man. You guys are going to have a hell of a time monetizing your creativity. It's virtually impossible. It's really, really difficult, because first of all, let's say you make an original product. You think the world will beat a pathway to your door if you build a better mousetrap. It's like, that's complete rubbish. It isn't true in the least. If you make a good creative product, you've probably solved about 5% of your problem. Because then you have marketing, which is insanely difficult, and then you have sales, and then you have customer support, and then you have to build an organization, and you have to, if it's really novel, you have to tell people what the hell the thing is. You know, we built this future authoring program, right? And it's available for people online. So how do you market that? No one knows what that is, and that's a real problem. If you write a book, well, then you have the problem that another million people have also written a book. But if you produce something that's completely new and doesn't have a category, people can't search for it online. How are they going to find it? So you just have, and then you have pricing problems, and it's really unbelievably difficult to produce something creative and then monetize it. And even worse, if you're the creative person, let's say you have a spectacular invention, you've got no money, right? You've got no customers. Those are big problems. And so maybe you go and you find a venture capitalist. We start with family and friends, because that's how it works. You raise money for your product. You raise money from your family and friends. That's assuming you have family and friends that have some money and that they're going to give it to you. And most people aren't in that situation. So it's a terrible barrier right off the bat. And then, of course, you're putting your family and friends at substantial financial risk, because the probability that your stupid idea is going to make money is virtually zero, even if it's a really brilliant idea. And so then let's say, well, you get past family and friends and you get venture capitalists involved, because that's often the next step, or an angel investor. There's steps in building a business. Family and friends, angel investor, that's some rich guy that you've happened to meet, some way, who's into this sort of thing and is willing to provide you with some money to get your product off the ground. Well, how much of your product is that person going to take? Well, most of it. And then if you get a venture, and no wonder, because you don't have any money, how are you going to bargain for control over your product? He'll just say, well, do you want the money or not? And if your answer is no, then he'll go and do something else with his money. It's not like there's no shortage of things that you can do with your money. There's a million things you can do with it. So you're not in a great bargaining position. And then if you get venture capitalists involved, they'll take another big chunk, and maybe if they're not very straight with you, they'll just throw you out, because maybe by that point in the company's development, you're nothing but a pain in the neck, because what do you know about marketing and sales and customer service and building an organization and running a business? Like, you don't have a clue, so why do they need you? So even if you're successful at generating a new idea and you put it into a business, the probability that you, as the originator of the idea, are going to make some money from it is very, very low. So imagine a large corporation, and you go in and you try to make a sales pitch to someone, and maybe they're in HR, and you say to them, look, you could use these tests. If you use it for 100 people, we'll increase your bottom line by $2 million a year. You'd think people would be jumping up and down about that. And they say, well, how much does it cost? And we say, well, it doesn't matter, because the cost to benefit ratio is what you should care about, not the cost, because they would want it, say, for $9 a test. It was like, no, if you do this for each, and I'll show you the mathematics in a bit, each person that you select with this test will bring $20,000 of extra value to your company. You're not getting that for $9. And then they say, well, wait a minute, we have a budget for testing that's limited to $9 a test. They say, well, it's going to produce $30,000 a year in revenue. They say, well, that revenue goes to another branch of the company and we won't get any credit for it. We'll just get punished because we've exceeded our budget for selection. I thought, oh yeah, never expected that to come up as an obstacle. So we had very well-designed products. They also took about 90 minutes, because we started with a full-scale neuropsychological assessment. So we took tests of dorsolateral prefrontal cortical ability, which had before that been administered by neuropsychologists, and we computerized them. We did that back in 1993, so it was among the first attempts to do this sort of thing. And then we had a 90-minute test battery that also assessed the big five, and then you could give that to employees, and you could produce this 80-20 differential that I described. And well, then we found out, well, the test was too long. It's like, well, what do you mean? You're going to gain $30,000 a year per employee if you use this test. It's like, no, people don't want to be tested that long. It's like, okay, so you want an accurate test that doesn't discriminate against anybody, that makes everyone feel good, that's dirt cheap, and that doesn't take any time at all. It's like, well, it took us about 15 years to build one of those after we had built the original thing that actually worked. And so even then, the process of trying to introduce it into the workplace was almost impossible. The other thing you find, if you're trying to sell to large companies, this is worth knowing, is that it's great if you can sell to a large company, because it's a large company, man. And so the potential for the sale is astronomical. But large companies are so slow, you cannot believe it. And so it might take you 3 years. First of all, you have to find who you should talk to. That's impossible, because all the people that you can talk to have no decision-making power whatsoever. So all you do is waste your time talking to them. They'll talk to you, they'll have meetings with you, but it won't matter, because they don't have any decision-making power. And then you can't get access to people who have the decision-making power, because they don't let you have access to them. And so that's a huge problem. And even figuring them out is a huge problem. And even figuring out that those are the people that you need to talk to is a huge problem. So that might take you 5 years just to get it through your head that you're wasting your time 95% of the time talking to the wrong people. And so then the next thing that happens, this is really comical. So let's say you do make some headway. It takes you 3 bloody years. You've made a relationship with the person. They're ready to launch it, and then they have to market it internally, and that takes them a year, because they have to convince everybody to get on board. And then the corporation reshuffles, and the person that you're dealing with disappears. It's like, that happened to us. We were marketing to a very large company. We got all the way up to the CEO and ready to, this was with the Future Authoring Program. And we were ready to launch the damn product. It took us a huge amount of time to get through all the layers. And just the week that we were going to launch it, the CEO resigned and the company's stock crashed. And that was the end of that. Bang. And large companies are like that. Like, they're extremely slow. And the typical duration that a person lasts in a given position, and this is something to consider with regards to your careers, is about 4 years.